Hi guys! So in today's tutorial, we're going to be talking about how to animate with our character rig. If you haven't seen the previous part on how we created a character rig, I might suggest you go back and check out that one if you'd like to create your own character for this. If not, we do have a character that you can download in the video description below, so make sure to check that out. For character rig animation, a lot of TV shows these days use character rigs. Things like Rick and Morty or Bluey all use character rigs. So it's a pretty important skill to learn, and often I see the notion that animating with a character rig is easier, it's lazier than traditional animation, and I couldn't disagree more. It's incredibly difficult and takes a lot of skill to make it look good. So that's what we're going to go over today, is how to take your character rig animation and animate it in a way that hopefully looks pretty good. So the first step before you get started animating is to grab your audio, if you're animating to audio. It's really important to have your audio first so that you can plan out what your animation is going to be. We have a little piece of audio here, and this is what we're going to animate to.
So this goes here, and this goes,
This was recorded by my friend Kevin, who is an excellent animator. If you want to check out his stuff, his Twitter is in the description below. So this is the audio we're going to animate to. Before we get started posing our character rig, before we start getting into the weeds with posing the rig itself, since that gets a little bit complicated, it's a lot easier to draw things out first. So let's play through the audio a couple of times and just kind of visualize in our head what we want to happen. So here I'm opening up Microsoft Paint, which is my favorite program to do doodles in, but feel free to use whatever program you find useful to do your sketches in. So here I've written out my dialogue just so I can keep track of the different beats, and I like to use commas to kind of indicate where the pauses are, which are very important for animation. And then next I'll take the rectangle tool and just draw out some little scene rectangles. I'm not really too worried about getting them accurate to the correct proportions or anything. These are meant to be super quick doodles that don't really matter. We call them thumbnails because we draw them small. It not only makes them quick to draw, but also if we need to delete, rearrange them, redraw them, it's super quick, super easy. You don't get too attached to them because they are just scribbles after all. So I think for this scene, I want it to be pretty simple. He's just standing over on the right third of the screen. Something that would be very helpful for this step is knowing how to storyboard. There's different things to know for storyboarding, like different ways to position your camera, different kinds of shots. If you'd like me to do a video on how to do storyboards, let me know in the comment section below. So there's our thumbnails. Just really quick, simple doodles just to get the idea of the story down. Alright, so now that we have our thumbnails, let's go back into our animation program. So here I'm creating a new scene. We'll call it Stacking version 01, and I'm setting it up to be 1920 by 1080 at 24 frames per second. Press create. So this tutorial assumes that you're fairly familiar with Toon Boom Harmony. I'm not going to go over very basic things. If you're completely new to Toon Boom Harmony, I would recommend checking out my part 1 of this tutorial series, which I'll link in the corner up above. So the first thing I want to do is import my audio. So to do that, I'm going to go up to File, Import, Sound, select my audio, click Open. So I want to make sure that my scene is as long as the audio. So to do that, I can double click on this music note down here, and that'll bring up my audio, and I can scroll through this top window right here to see how long my audio is. So I can see it's 194 frames long. So let's do that. Let's go up to Scene, Scene Length, and set it to 194 frames. Press OK. And then next I want to import my thumbnails so I can time them out to the audio. So I'm going to go up to File, Import Images, navigate to my thumbnails, select them, click Open, and I want to import them as a Toon Boom bitmap drawing. That way I can edit it and do little changes to it, so I'll select that, press OK. A really easy way we can time this out to our audio is just throw a peg onto our thumbnail layer right here, and just animate this peg so it's the same size as our animation, and you can play through it or scrub through it if you have these audio options turned on. The speaker plays audio, and then the S stands for scrubbing. And we don't want a motion tween, right? We don't want it to do this, so we just click on this line right here and we click on stop motion keyframe to get rid of that motion tween. I also have this custom button right here, stop motion keyframes. If I turn that on, then whenever I create a new keyframe, it'll be a stop motion keyframe. The next thing we can do is to import our character rig so we can use it as reference when we're doing our rough animation. So to do that, we want to use the library window, which is over here. If you don't see that, just go up to Windows and then Library. So we want to import our character rig. So here I have my character rig as a TPL file, which stands for template in Toon Boom Harmony. So in order to import this TPL file, I want to copy the folder path that it exists in. So I go up to my address bar up here, press Ctrl C to copy that path, and then back in my library window, I want to right click down here in this little window and go to Open Library. And if I paste that same path right here and press Enter, and then Enter again, that'll import that folder. And then when I click on that folder, I'll see my character rig.tpl file inside of here. So to import that character rig, I just click and drag it from my library onto my node view or my camera view. I'll import it into my node view over here. And that brings in our character rig, and we just need to attach it to the composite just like this so we can see it. And then we can select this master peg right here and arrange him and resize him to roughly the same size that he's going to be in the animation. So maybe about that size. And then next we can start drawing our rough animation. So let's make a new layer for our rough animation here. And I'm going to keep zoomed out because I don't want to get caught up in details when I'm doing this stage. I find being zoomed out kind of helps keep things in perspective, keeps you from focusing on little tiny details. So to add a new layer in the node view, just press Ctrl R and we'll call it rough, R-U-F-F. And if we click on this little light bulb button down here, that'll fade everything else out, allowing us to draw on top of things a little bit easier. So for doing rough animation, you can select whatever kind of brush you want. I have this custom brush that I like to use that sort of has this texture on it that I really like. And also, I like to set my red and blue colors to be a little bit transparent. Just makes it feel more like a sketch pencil that way. So for doing rough animation, it might feel a little bit intimidating depending on what kind of character you're animating with. Ours that we have here is pretty simple, but if you had a more complex character rig and you're like, I have to draw this character, I would recommend just keeping things simple. You know, you're really just going for the motion and the timing of things because you don't have to draw it on model since we have a character rig that's already on model. So what I would recommend is just keeping things to the main 3 volumes, which is usually a circle for the head, an egg for the rib cage, and then a sideways egg for the hips. And then for the arms and legs, just use sticks, and then you can draw in whatever expression is on the head. That's usually as far as I'll go for rough animation. So if you can animate a circle, and if you can animate a line, you should be alright. Again, we're just trying to get rough posing down. So I'll draw in his 3 main bodies, kind of keeping the line of action in mind. And we'll continue drawing all these key poses using our thumbnails as reference. And just kind of rough out the way that our keyframes are going to look for our animation. So I'll go through the whole audio, get all these drawings done. And then for this last part where the character is freaking out, I'm going to go straight ahead and just kind of like draw some poses that I feel will read really well while this freak out audio is happening. And then once all my keyframes are done, we can move on to the next step. Alright, we got our rough animation all finished. And honestly, I probably went a little bit too far with my rough animation. I probably didn't need to make it this clean or this many frames, but I wanted to make sure to have my rough animation in a place I was happy with because it's faster to adjust a drawing rather than to adjust a puppet rig. So if we play through our animation, this is what it looks like.
So this goes here, and this goes,
I really like the ground slap. Alright, so now that we have our rough animation ready to use as a reference, let's bring in our character rig. So I disconnected my character rig just so I could focus on the drawn animation, so I'm just going to connect it up to the composite node underneath my frame-by-frame animation that I did, and the character rig doesn't last for as long as the scene does. You can see it disappears here at frame 100. So what we want to do is we want to make sure our character rig is collapsed by clicking this arrow right here to collapse the whole character rig. Go to the last frame of our animation, click the last frame on our collapsed character rig layer, and press F5 to extend the art for our character rig. So that way he lasts throughout the whole animation. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to pose our character for each one of the keyframes. So we're not going to worry about any of the in-betweens right now. We're just going to go through every single keyframe and pose the character so that he matches our rough animation. So again, I'm going to use the transform tool to do this, and I'm going to make sure that select peg only is selected so I don't select any of my drawing layers. And so I don't accidentally select any of my rough animation or the background, I'm also going to select the padlock on all of those layers to lock them so I don't accidentally select them. And again, a very useful hotkey for doing this is B to go up your hierarchy and Shift B to go down your hierarchy. So if I just want to move the head, I can press B until I get to the head, move the head into place, select the eyeballs, move them into place, and we'll just go through and do this on each one of our keyframes. If your drawn animation is getting in the way, you can adjust the opacity in a couple different ways. ways. One way is you can click this little thumbnail view on your rough animation here and just drag this opacity slider until it's like around 50% or so. Or you can also add a transparency node. So in our node view, if I press enter and search for transparency and then select the transparency node and hold down Alt and drag it underneath our rough animation, that will also make it transparent. So if we want to adjust the transparency, we just click the yellow box next to it, and this will bring up the properties for your transparency node. This works backwards from how you might think. It's the amount of transparency is what this is doing. So if you want it to be 20% opaque, you would actually put in 80% transparency here. And you can see that makes it a lot more transparent. So it's kind of the opposite of what you would think, but that's the way I tend to think about it, is it's the amount of transparency. So let's continue posing out our character here. Don't worry about it being exactly like your rough animation. For any body parts where they need adjusted, like this arm being too long, for example, you can select it and then turn on the show deformers option right here. And then you can adjust your envelope deformers by shift selecting how many nodes you want to move, and then just bring them up and adjust this arm so it's a bit smaller like this. And then for this hand, we want to redraw it, right? We want to draw a new hand for this position right here. So I'm going to select this layer, go down to my timeline, press O to navigate to that layer, and that's this hand drawing right here, right? So to do a new drawing, I can either click create blank drawing or create duplicate drawing. I'm going to create duplicate drawing just so I can reuse these fingers that I've already drawn and just redraw the thumb to be over here. So I'm going to click create duplicate drawing. That's created a new hand drawing here. And then I'm just going to redraw this hand so it works for this frame here. And there's our new hand drawing. And we'll keep continuing to pose this character. For this body part, I want it to be in front of everything else, right? So right now my automat is kind of getting in the way. So one hotkey that you can do to bring objects forward or behind is Alt down. You can think of down as like bringing towards you, and then Alt up as pushing away from you. So if you want an object or a body part to go behind, just use Alt up to move it behind. Again, thinking of it as pushing away from you, or Alt down to bring it towards you. So super useful for rearranging body parts if you need something to be ahead of another body part or behind it. So for this leg, I'm just going to bring it forward just so I can have it in front of everything else for these poses. And we'll keep continuing to pose this character. I decided for this animation, I think I want the eyes to be on top of the eye layer and not be cut off by the cutter. I kind of like the way that looks, so I'm just gonna select the eye with my transform tool, go into my node view, hover over it, and press the hotkey of O to navigate to where those pupils are. And I'm just gonna select these cutter nodes and press the hotkey of D to disable them, or you can select this red X button up here to disable. So that'll just disable the cutters. And then if you want them to come back, you just press A for enable them again. So I'm just gonna disable those just so my pupils can be on top of my eyeballs, just like that. So we need to draw a new prop for these blocks that he's putting together. So I'm gonna go to my node view, press Ctrl R to make a new drawing, and I'm gonna call it block number 1, add and close, and I'll just put it in front of template Chan here. And using my geometry drawing tools, I'll just draw one of them. And then I'm gonna add a peg by selecting this node and pressing Ctrl P for peg to add a peg to it. And I'll select that peg, grab one of my advanced animation tools over here, and just make sure the anchor point's right in the center. And then I'm going to highlight both of those, the peg and the drawing layer, and I'm going to press Ctrl-Shift-D to duplicate it. Again, Ctrl-Shift-D is a custom hotkey that I set up myself, but when I duplicate it, then what I can do is I can take that duplicated block, move it over, and even adjust the drawing on it. So I can change this letter right here, and then I'll duplicate it again, move this one up here, and then we need one for the one he's holding, right? So I'm going to duplicate that block again, but instead of attaching it to the composite node down here, I'm going to Control X to cut that node out. I'm going to use my transform tool, select his hand, which will be holding the block, and I'll go into my node view and press the hotkey of O to navigate to it. And I'm going to press Control V to paste those nodes back in. So here's our new block. We'll put it right here. If I want to add a new comment, I could press Shift C to add in a new backdrop for this. Maybe make it like a pink color, call it prop, like that. And then what I want to do is I want to parent the hand node peg onto this prop right here. So I just drag a second piece of spaghetti from hand O2 peg onto this new block. And then block number 4, I want to be on top of this hand layer, right? So I'm going to drag from the bottom of my block drawing layer and put it on top or to the left of my hand layer, just like that. And it'll need reposition, so I'll just select the peg here, use my transform tool, move it into place. It's interfering with the auto patch node, so I need to make sure it's above the auto patch node here, just like that. And it's a little bit big, so resize it down. And then again, I can change the text on here. I also want his fingers to overlap it. So I think what I'm gonna do is just take this drawing layer, make a duplicate drawing so I don't lose that original drawing. I'm just gonna use my line tool here, just cut some lines for his fingers here to overlap just like that. And there we go. We have a drawing that's overlapped with his fingers just like that. And now because it's been parented to the hand layer, whenever I move the hand, the prop is gonna go with it, even though they're two separate objects. Same with his forearm. So now the prop is following the arm just like that because I've parented it to the hand peg. So when I'm creating a new key pose, for example, my next one will probably be this one where he's leaning forward, I want to make sure to take all of my rig layer here and collapse it down like this so that it only makes it one layer just like this. And then I can go here and click add keyframe button right here. And I want to work in stop motion keyframe, so I'm going to click here and just click this stop motion keyframe button right here just to get rid of that motion tween. We don't want that yet. And then with that layer collapsed, you can see if I expand this group here, it's added a keyframe on all of my layers all at the same time. So this is how I set a new key pose when I'm posing my character rig. So let's continue and pose out this second keyframe. Alright, so for this keyframe, I want to have him drop the prop off on this space, right? So we need to remove the prop from his hand and have the prop appear where the blocks are. So to do that, I'm going to have two different props. We're going to have the one that's attached to his hand, and then we'll have a different one appear above this block right here, and we'll have that happen on the same frame. So for this block, I'm going to select its drawing layer, press O to navigate to it, and then I'm going to select this frame and use my brackets to go left until the frame disappears, and you'll see the frame disappears down here in the timeline. Another way we could do that is with the library view. The library view is just a more visual way to see what frame you're selecting, so I can just slide this all the way to the left to make a blank frame or no drawing at all. I prefer to use the brackets just because I find that easier. And now that the block is gone, let's have it appear on top of this other block. So we'll take this prop block right here, press Ctrl Shift D to duplicate it, and press Ctrl X to cut it, move up to where our other blocks are, press Ctrl V to paste it, and then attach this onto our composite just like this. And then I'm going to highlight that peg, press O to navigate to it, and this is doing the opposite of what we want. So we want the frame to appear here. So I can go to my library, select the first frame, that's the one without the corners cut out from it, and then I can navigate to the end of my animation, select the last frame, press F5 to extend that exposure so you can see it's exposed all the way. We can also get rid of all these keyframes that we don't need, so get rid of those. And then we want it to disappear at the beginning here, so I can just drag this slider or use my brackets to have it disappear. It appears on this frame, and then we'll add a keyframe here, but you can see it's been animated so it's a little bit off from where it's supposed to be. So we can press this button up here to reset transformations, or Shift R is the hotkey, and that'll reset its transformation to where it is by default. So that'll reset its size, its rotation. All we need to do is just move it up to the top, just like this. And then he drops the cube off just like that. So now when I move his hand, you can see the cube no longer moves along with it. So that's how I would drop off a prop. Alright, so for this part, I want to copy this previous keyframe that we made before to kind of work off of it for an anticipation, because it's pretty similar to the frame we drew here. Actually, it's pretty darn close, so we might not even need to change it that much. So I want to copy just the motion in these keys, right? I don't want to copy the fact that the drawing changed for this block or the drawing changes on the hand. I only want to copy and paste the position, rotation, and deformers from this pose. So the way I can do that is with these options down here. Here it copy and pastes both drawing and keyframes. Here it copy and pastes only keyframes, and here it copy and pastes only drawings. These are pretty useful buttons to know. So in this case, I'm going to switch to keyframe only mode, copy this keyframe, go down to my next keyframe that I want to paste, and press Ctrl V. And you can see he's moved forward, he's done this exact same pose, except all the drawings are kept as what we had before. So his hand stays the same, it's not grabbing the block again, things like that. So pretty useful for copying and pasting poses. I like to set it back to frames and keyframes after I'm done with it though, just so I don't forget that that option was changed to something else before. So for this part, I wanted to have him face to the side. So in order to do this, I'm going to have to move a lot of body parts to where they need to be, and also redraw parts as I need them. So for example, instead of having two eyes here and two pupils, one of these pupils I'm going to get rid of. I can either move it off the screen, or I can go to the drawing layer and use my bracket keys to the left to get rid of it, just like that. And then for this eye layer, same thing. I'm going to need to go to the drawing layer, do a new drawing, then just use the cutter on the left eye here, there. And then the nose is going to have to be over the top of the face. So a lot of just readjusting things, removing them just to make this profile view, which isn't too big of a deal since it only happens once. So we'll just adjust things as we need. So we're going to continue posing out our character on all of our keyframe poses, just following the same process as we were doing before. And then for this part where I'm animating the blocks, I'm actually doing it frame by frame, kind of like stop motion, and just sort of feeling it out and scrubbing back and forth, seeing if the physics feel right, and just animating it by hand. This part was really fun to do. I like doing this part a lot. And there we go. All right, we finished our posing animation. So this is all of our keyframes that we drew out on our rough animation. So the next thing we're going to go over is how to add motion tweens and in-betweens to this puppet animation. So let's go left to right. Right now he's anticipating into this pose. You kind of learn over time how long each length should take. For anticipations, usually it takes about 8 frames. I'll go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Add a keyframe here with this add keyframe button, and then I'll add a motion tween using this motion tween button right here. And that creates what we call a linear motion tween. If we move from left to right, each spacing for each one of these frames is exactly the same. There's no cushioning on either side. So to add easing, we select the first frame and then click this drop down right here. And these curves right here, we're going to call them ease ins because it's going into the motion, right? So it'll be slowest when it goes into the motion. So if we select the strongest ease in, you can see at the beginning of the animation, he's barely moving at all. And then towards the end of the animation, he's moving a lot faster. So if we play it, you can see he starts out slow and then speeds into movement at the end. Whereas if we did the opposite, if we went down to these curves on the bottom, the ease outs, and selected the most extreme one, you can see he starts out really quick and then slows down towards the end for an ease out. It looks like this. And then if we do an ease in and ease out, which is these S curves here in the middle, and we select the most extreme one, you can see it starts out slow, really quick in the middle, and then slow at the end. These generally are the most organic kind of movements. So an ease in, ease out is generally going to be the most natural feeling. So it depends on how poppy you want your animation to be, where you want the emphasis to be. So I'll kind of do it just based on how I want the animation to feel. If I want it to feel smooth and soft, I'll use ease in, ease outs. If I want it to feel a bit snappier, I'll use ease outs. And then I'll just go through each one of these movements, add a motion tween. Like for example here, where it's going from the anticipation to the overshoot, I'll probably do an ease in, ease out for this segment. And then from the overshoot into the settle, which is this pose right here, I'll probably do another ease in, ease out for that one. And the block kind of snaps into place. We'll clean that up later, but let's just play through our animation, see how that feels. So that feels pretty good to me. So now our character's all fully animated. In order to keep this animation where he's dropping off the block from snapping like this, the reason it snaps is because it's happening at the very end of the motion right here. A way we can hide that is to have it transfer somewhere in the middle of this motion tween right here. You can see my motion tween starts here and ends here. So if we have the block pop off around this frame in the middle here, it should hide it a lot better. So let's navigate to where his hand is. We'll select his hand layer with our transform tool, press O in our timeline to navigate to it. And then I don't want to move the keyframes, right? I just want to move the drawing frame. So I'm going to switch to move drawing mode only. And I'm going to take this drawing right here, select it, and then I'm going to drag it behind until it's in the middle of this frame right here. And I'll do that for the block right here. So it'll disappear right there. And obviously we need this block, the one that's stationary, to appear on that frame. So we'll select that, press O, or use this magnifier to navigate to where that layer is. Shift select both its peg and its drawing layer. So I'll want to go back to modify keyframe and drawing, select both of those, and then drag that back to that frame. And that'll drop the block off in the middle of that motion. So now when we play it, that feels way smoother. It doesn't feel like it pops off as much as it did before. And that's pretty much it. That's the general overview of how to do motion tweens and how to change animation in the middle of a motion to sort of hide the fact that it's changing. Makes it just look a little bit smoother. So let's continue through our animation and add motion tweens to everything. Also adding our easing in a way that feels appealing. Again, I usually use ease outs for my anticipations and then ease in and ease outs for my overshoots and my settles. So let's go through and add motion tweens to all of this. Alright, so we've got our animation all done except for our facial animation. So here's what it looks like so far.
So this goes here, and this goes
So I like to save the facial animation for last, because if you go through and you do your facial animation first and then you're doing all of these like head turns and like squash and stretch frames, you know, you might have to redo your facial animation. So it's important to do the body acting before you get into facial animation. So now that our body acting is done, let's do our facial animation. So for lip sync, I usually like to make a new layer on top. I'll call it mouth rough. And here I'll usually draw the mouth outside of the stage here. So I'll draw just a really rough mouth shape over here. And I'll lip sync with this drawn mouth before I start animating with my puppet, because a cheap little drawing that took me a few seconds to do is a lot easier to change and adjust rather than a puppet rig. So let's do lip sync with this little drawing right here first. And to do lip sync, we want to turn on our audio scrubbing. So audio scrubbing is when you scrub back and forth using your playhead and you can hear the audio. So to turn on audio scrubbing, that's with these speakers down here. There's this speaker which enables audio, and then the speaker with the S next to it, that enables scrubbing. So here I can hear him start to do an S mouth shape, so I'm going to do a blank frame here and just draw a really simple S mouth shape like this. Again, this is only for reference, it's not meant to be a good drawing. And then he's got an O shape here, or so. And then remember how earlier I was saying I like to use that transitional mouth shape to go from a mouth shape into an O shape? That's probably where I would put that here. So if I do a blank frame 2 frames earlier, then here is where I would put that transitional mouth that we were talking about earlier. And that makes the word so. And then here it'd probably go even smaller for so. And then anytime I want to reuse a mouth that I've already drawn, I don't have to redraw it. I can just use my bracket keys to cycle through the drawings I've already drawn and just go back to that S mouth shape, just like that. And I'll just go through and I'll animate my lip sync just like this, drawing every mouth shape depending on what sound that I hear. So let's go through our entire audio and just draw our different mouth shapes where they need to be. Alright, so now I've got my lip sync all roughed in and it looks like this.
So this goes here, and this goes,
I'm pretty happy with that. One last thing that I like to do when I'm doing lip sync is to move all of this animation back by 2 frames. And the way I always explain it is that light travels faster than sound. So you usually see something happen before you hear it, right? So I'll select the first frame of my animation, go to the end of my lip sync animation, hold down Shift, select the last frame of animation, and then just move it back by 2 frames, just like this. So now when we play it, it looks like this. And as you can see, it just looks better. So now that I have my reference that I can look up, I can start implementing these frames onto my character rig here. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to my first frame here, and he starts with a closed mouth shape. So I'm going to use my bracket keys and just navigate to my closed mouth just like that. Go to the next frame of lip sync where his mouth starts to open. So it's an S shape just like this. I'll go to the jaw, press B until I get to the peg here, add a keyframe, turn on my deformer with my turn on deformer button up here, zoom in and just drag his chin down just a little bit so it opens up along with his jaw just like that. Then our next frame is this mouth shape, so select his mouth, use my bracket keys to go to that mouth shape just like that. Select his jaw, press B till I get to the peg, press my add keyframe button. This is just so that I add a keyframe on everything underneath the jaw, including all of these deformer points. Then I'll take my deformer and just move it down and forward a little bit just like that. Then our next mouth shape is the big O shape. And again, I'll select the jaw, press B until I get to the peg, add a keyframe, and I'll just continue doing this all throughout our entire animation until our lip sync on our puppet rig matches the rough lip sync we did up here. So here, where I'm going back to my S mouth shape, I can copy the same jaw that we had before for our S mouth shape. So I'll select the jaw, press B until I get to the peg. I can either use the hotkey of O to navigate to it, or I can press this magnifying glass to navigate to our jaw layer here. And I can just go back to a frame where I had the S mouth shape here, copy that keyframe, making sure my copy keyframes option is turned on, go to where that S mouth shape happens, and then press Ctrl V to paste that same jaw shape right there. And that's how I can copy and paste jaw shapes from one to the other. And while I'm down here in the jaw layer, I don't want this motion tween to be happening, right? So I can select my first frame of my jaw animation, go down to the end here, hold down Shift, and click to select my entire jaw animation, and then click this stop motion keyframe button, which removes removes all of that motion tweening that we don't want to happen. We also don't want all these keyframes for the jaw. We only want keyframes where we're creating new mouth shapes, right? So let's go through and we'll delete all of these keyframes for the rest of our animation where we haven't lip synced yet. So I'll select all those, press minus keyframe button. That way we're starting from scratch. And I don't want to create any more motion tweening, so I'm going to turn on my create stop motion button right here. Again, this button isn't here by default. You have to right click, go to customize, and in this search bar, you want to search for the button stop motion keyframe mode. Very useful button, super duper useful. So when that's on, it won't create motion tweens as we create new keyframes. So here I accidentally deleted keyframes we probably shouldn't have. Whenever something like this happens, what I usually do is I, first of all, don't panic. Let me first make sure I save. I undo before all of that happened and see if we can get those frames back, which we can. There they are. So that's from frame 71 to 98. So I'll take those frames, shift select them, right click, copy cells. And then because I just saved before doing that, I'm going to close this file without saving it and then reopen it again. And now we can go back to those frames on our jaw layer here, right click, paste cells, and there we go, we've got our keyframes back. So whenever something like that happens, that's usually how I fix it, is I just undo before it all happened, copy whatever I need to copy, close without saving, reopen it, and then paste what I just copied. So not a huge deal. We were able to fix it, which is good. All right, let's continue on. So this mouse shape I drew special. We don't have this mouse shape yet. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select my mouse shape here, and it's got a transform on it, so it's making it all squished. This is where the drawing view can come in handy. So instead of drawing it in the camera view, if we go into our drawing view, it's going to isolate the mouth and take all the transformation off of it. So I go to that frame, add a duplicate frame, so that way I can get rid of all this color, convert that to red so I can use it as reference, and then draw a new mouth shape on this frame here. And for here, I just wanted to do a bigger ah shape for this mouth. There we go. And when we go back, now we've got our special mouth shape, just like that. And because it's a new mouth shape, we also have to add a new keyframe for this jaw here and adjust it, just like that. So for this last closed mouth shape, I'm just gonna select it, create a duplicate frame, and then just adjust it so it matches our final pose here a bit better. Something like that. And now, if we look at our animation, with all of our lip sync plugged in, it looks like this.
So this goes here, and this goes,
One last thing I'd like to do is put in a blink before he turns around here. So because we created our blink animation frames, we can just select our eye layer here and use our bracket keys, select the first frame of our blink, go forward 2 frames, select the next frame. So I selected this eye shape, but you can see our pupils are going over our eyes. And earlier I went into the rig and I disabled the cutter nodes, which allow the eye to cut out the pupils. That's because I wanted the pupil shape to kind of stand out in front of the eyes for this animation. So I did do that on purpose, but because of that, when we're doing our blink, we do need to go into these eyeballs. And for every frame that the blink is happening, we need to create a duplicate frame, use our cutter tool, and just make sure to get rid of the top of the pupils there for all of those frames. So again, select the other pupil, create duplicate frame, use our cutter tool, delete that, go forward a couple frames, do the same thing, select our next frame in our blink, select our eyes, create duplicate frame, use our cutter tool, get rid of those eye shapes, get rid of the amount of pupil we need to. And then here we'll have the blink fully closed, so we can take our eyeball, do a duplicate frame, select it, delete it, just like that. Do the same thing on the other pupil. For this eye shape, we don't want it open, so I'll create a duplicate frame and just copy this closed eye shape, paste it here, like that. And then when he starts to turn around, I'll have his eye sort of half open on this frame. So select his eye, create a duplicate frame, have it half open like that, get rid of all this extra, move his eye crease down, just like that. And then on this frame, I'll have his eyes fully open. All right, so now we have a blink, turn, and then he finishes the blink as he turns around. So here's our animation all finished.
So this goes here, and this goes,
So that's our animation all finished. So now when we want to export our animation, we just go up to File, Export, Movie. And for video format, I usually like to do H.264. It's a good small file size. And then we click Browse where we want to save it. I'll just save it onto the desktop here. And then for export range, I'll click All. Keep the scene resolution the same. Color space I don't need to worry about. Because we selected H.264 instead of QuickTime Movie, we don't have any movie options, which is fine because Toon Boom is taking care of it. So now we just click OK. It'll export our movie. So here's our animation all finished.
So this goes here, and this goes,
And that's how to animate a puppet rig in Toon Boom Harmony. I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like to learn more about animation, I also have a paid-for animation course that you can check out in the video description down below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you'd like to stay tuned for more animation videos. I've been Jesse J. Jones. Happy animating. Until next time, bye-bye! Be sure to click here to subscribe to my channel to stay updated on future videos and tutorials. If you'd like to help support my work, you can click here to visit my Patreon page. You also get access to rewards like early access to tutorials, source animation files, and access to a secret Patreon-only chat room. Keep on animating, and until next time, bye-bye!
So this goes here, and this goes, So this goes here, and this goes,